On November 7th, Yahoo published an interview with Todd Fisher, brother of the late Carrie Fisher. In it, he revealed that the original plan for Episode 9 was for Leia to be the titular Last Jedi, and the ultimate payoff of the movie. So by implication, that would also have been the payoff for the sequel trilogy as a whole, and therefore of the entire 9-movie saga. That plan was however torpedoed when Carrie Fisher tragically passed in December of 2016, 1 year prior to the release of even The Last Jedi, and before production had ever begun on Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. To me, this is actually a shocking revelation, not because of Leia being the planned hero of the franchise, but because this reveals how badly Lucasfilm failed at every level in response to Carrie Fisher's untimely passing. I shall elaborate on that in this editorial, where I will first look into what the plan for the sequel trilogy was, how that plan could and should have changed in light of Carrie Fisher's passing, what they seem to have done instead, and why that might blow up in their face. If you should find the content and analysis provided in this video to be to your liking, then please leave a like, subscribe, and indicate that you want notifications on all videos so you don't miss out. With that out of the way, let's dive in. From Bob Iger's book, Ride of a Lifetime, we know that they considered George Lucas' treatment for a sequel trilogy, but decided to go another direction. And that direction was mapped out by Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, and J.J. Abrams. Although in order of who influenced the story the most, the order is likely Abrams, Kennedy, and then Iger. Be that as it may, there was a plan. Not too detailed a plan, the directors of each episode were still supposed to be the main creative force behind it, but the main story beats intended to take place over the course of the sequel trilogy were still in place. Case in point, Rian Johnson wanted BB-8 and R2-D2 to switch places at the end of The Force Awakens from what J.J. Abrams had originally planned, as that would help him out realizing his vision for The Last Jedi, and this is something J.J. agreed to do. Then, of course, Rian Johnson would deviate from the plan, with Kathleen Kennedy's blessing, for the simple reason that the two got along great together, and if rumors are to be believed, because they shared political views. Later on, and in reference to The Last Jedi taking things in a slightly different direction than what was originally planned, Abrams told the Associated Press that the story we're telling, the story that we started to conceive when we did The Force Awakens, was allowed to continue. Episode 8 didn't really derail anything that we were thinking about. Notice the modifier there, didn't really derail anything. That's code for something was derailed, but not everything, and probably not the main story. In light of Todd Fisher's recent comment about Leia being the true Last Jedi and the intended payoff in The Rise of Skywalker, I am now inclined to believe, so this is just my opinion here, that the plan was always for Luke to die in Episode 8, then Episode 9 would have Leia, the Last Jedi, train Rey and complete her training. That way, if leaks are to be believed, Rey would become the first Skywalker. Skywalker now being the brand new name for Jedi version 2.0. So, what did Rian Johnson do? How did he deviate from the plan? My guess is that he rewrote Rey's parentage to be insignificant. He killed Snoke, and he went far in redeeming Kylo, and I think he did it all in the name of subverting expectations. I also think that's the reason why he made Luke such a downtrodden old miser and loser too, but he did die by the end, which probably was in accordance with the plan. He also did establish Leia's Jedi superpowers, which was no doubt part of the plan as well, seeing as she would be the last Jedi by the movie's end. If that is close to the truth, which I think it is, then that sheds new light on Abrams' comment about Rian Johnson not really derailing the plans. Some additional challenges were no doubt created by Snoke being killed off subvertingly early, but where the Skywalker storyline was concerned, Episode 9 could proceed mostly as planned. So maybe Rian Johnson really didn't deviate from the plan as much as previously thought after all, seeing as he seemingly stuck to the main beats of the Skywalker storyline. But ironically, doing so could very well have been the biggest mistake both Rian Johnson and his co-conspirator Kathleen Kennedy ever did. If Todd Fisher is right, and he probably is, then Rise of Skywalker would have been about Leia training Rey, using her own lightsaber and everything. Whether or not that plan was a good one in the first place is debatable, but here is one thing that isn't. Carrie Fisher died on December 27th of 2016, before a single frame of footage had been shot for Rise of Skywalker. What they had to work with, according to Todd Fisher, were 8 minutes worth of deleted or otherwise unused scenes. Scenes that now had to be retro-engineered to fit an entirely new context than they were filmed for, and that had to be construed in such a way that it would appear on screen that Leia has been training Rey, and in the process, they also have to give Leia a worthy and final send-off. I would be willing to bet that is why Colin Trevorrow, the original director for Rise of Skywalker, ended up leaving the production. When signing on, he naturally assumed Carrie Fisher would be alive and well and on set, ready to film whatever his vision required. Instead, he was suddenly expected to Frankenstein her part in the movie using nothing but discarded spare parts from the previous movies. To be clear, I don't know if Colin Trevorrow decided that I can't do this and quit, or if he said, we have to change the plan now, and was overruled and fired. Maybe the truth of that will come out one day, but for now, we do know that it is up to J.J. Abrams to salvage what can be salvaged of the original plan and do what would be a career first for him, namely stick the landing. Can he do it? Well, from what I'm hearing, the movie is shaping up to be a, dare I say it, a Frankensteinian abomination. A major reason for that is in no small part having to restructure the entire movie to fit around the 8 minutes worth of previously discarded Leia footage. So maybe they shouldn't have done that at all. Considering the new information Todd Fisher has presented us with, the criticism Rian Johnson has faced for deviating from the plan, and Kathleen Kennedy for letting him, should stop. Instead, they should both be criticized for not having deviated from the plan even more, or better yet, for not having thrown it out the window altogether. Because that is what they should have done, and Kathleen Kennedy should have made that call. I don't want to come across as overtly insensitive here, but if their overall trilogy plan rode on a major Leia presence in Episode 9, and Carrie Fisher died during the making of Episode 8, then proceeding with the same plan is the worst thing they could have done. Consider the Fast and the Furious franchise. When Paul Walker tragically died while Furious 7 was in production, they didn't set his character up to have a major role in the next movie just because the original script might have called for that. No, they changed the script and they changed their plans in light of his passing and retired his character in the final version of the movie, which obviously had to be revised from its originally planned form. That way, Walker's absence would be natural from there on out. Producing the scenes necessary to pull this off was no small feat. It meant delaying the movie by 3/4 of a year and using Paul Walker's brothers as CGI-enhanced stand-ins, but they made it, and the franchise could proceed without further hiccup. To paraphrase a YouTube series I'm a big fan of, doing something like that in The Last Jedi would have been super easy, barely an inconvenience. Consider this. When Carrie Fisher died, The Last Jedi was a year away from release. By that time, Rian Johnson already had a rough cut in which Leia has a near-death experience, but subverting all expectations. She Mary Poppins her way into safety. In the same cut, Luke, also subverting all expectations, randomly drops dead, isolated and alone, after the final fight. That was Rian's vision and the movie he set out to make. But after Carrie Fisher died, it was the wrong movie to make. Maybe Rian Johnson didn't care about the bigger picture, and he can always hide behind the fact that it's not his job to do so. Looking after the bigger picture is, however, Kathleen Kennedy's job. How she did not see that setting up Leia to have a big role in the next movie was going to be a huge problem when the time came to actually make it is utterly beyond me. Whatever they had planned for Leia to do in Episode 9, Carrie Fisher wasn't going to be there to film it. By contrast, Mark Hamill was very much so alive, and probably keen to return for a bigger role in Episode 9. In my opinion, this is where Kathleen Kennedy should have ordered Rian Johnson to remove the Mary Poppins escape and re-edit Leia's near-death scene into an actual death scene. To account for her absence in the rest of the movie, they'd need to reshoot some mourning Leia scenes as well as every subsequent scene in which Leia appeared. There was plenty time for that. For Luke, it would have been even easier. Just cut his death scene 5 seconds earlier. Just like J.J. Abrams did Rian Johnson the favor of switching BB-8 and R2-D2, helping him out. Rian Johnson could have returned that favor by switching who survived of Luke and Leia, helping Star Wars out. That way, Leia would have gotten a worthwhile and emotional death scene, while Luke would still have had the chance to redeem himself in a rewritten Episode 9, which Mark Hamill was, and still is, alive to film. If they had done something like that, they could have turned the whole thing around. They could have had Luke train Rey and truly made her the rising Skywalker. They could have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Instead, they stuck to the original plan, and in doing so, they run the risk of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory and shooting themselves in the face in the process. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.